Good morning and welcome to Heroes and Patriots, a program about national security, intelligence, and foreign policy. Today is Thursday, March 4th, 2021, and we are streaming live from the studios of KMUD Community Radio in Northern California. This is Mary Massey, and with me is friend and co-host John SAKOWICZ. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Mary, and good morning to our entire audience throughout the country and throughout the world via the World Wide Web, and a special welcome to the students of Sacred Heart High School in Yonkers, New York, who are listening.
Wonderful. Today's program and all programs will be archived with the KMUD station and our program website, heroespatriots.org, so you'll want to check that out. Views and opinions expressed today are not necessarily those of the board, staff, or volunteers of KMUD. We take listener calls for our guests. The number to ask your question, 707-923-3911. We only ask that you be brief. And our program engineer today is Katie Phillips, who will be taking your call and speaking with you. Thanks, Katie. During each program, we speak with men and women who courageously speak truth to power, and they are really today's true heroes and patriots. Our guests today are no exception. We will be speaking about climate, the environment, health and medical issues, climate changes, and how that affects national security issues, and the reduction of nuclear weapons worldwide. In this segment, we speak with Dr. Janice Kirsch. In 1983, Dr. Kirsch joined Physicians for Social Responsibility, or PSR, and became a speaker on environmental issues and the prevention of nuclear war. Dr. Kirsch attended medical school at the University of California, San Francisco, and trained in internal medicine as well as occupational and environmental medicine at that same institution. Dr. Kirsch completed advanced training in oncology and hematology at the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center and received her Master of Public Health degree from the University of California right here in Berkeley. Her research experience has been in the occupational and environmental causation of cancer and leukemia. Jan Kirsch serves as the Speakers Bureau Coordinator for 350 Bay Area. She is on the board of directors of San Francisco Physicians for Social Responsibility, and for the last 5 years has been a presenter for the Climate Reality Project, something we all want to know more about. Dr. Kirsch believes that activism is both a medical as well as a moral calling. And with that, we welcome Dr. Kirsch.
Greetings. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for joining us for this first segment. We are delighted to have you as a first-time guest to the program, and we'd very much like to learn about your story, if you will, as how you became involved in the 80s, what has happened since then. We want to hear about the Solutions Project and the Climate Reality Project.
Oh, terrific. How I became involved, well, let's go back a long, long way. So I was a kid. I was a kid who grew up with nuclear nightmares. It happened like twice a week, where I would awaken from sleep suddenly after having this dream where the beautiful sky with, peaceful white clouds, and then suddenly one of them wouldn't look quite right. It would be gray and growing way too fast, and then would have the top would turn into a fiery cap, and there was this unholy ring around a stem. And each time it happened, every single time, I thought, this time it isn't a dream. This time it's really happening, nuclear war. And I would quickly try to think, how do I get my parents, my dog, my brother, in that order, away from all this? Into the mountains or somewhere. But even a little kid knows that an old Chevy can't outrun radiation, lethal radiation. So I stopped looking at clouds. Anyway, these nightmares kept up. And then in 1983, I became involved with Physicians for Social Responsibility. Your next guest will go into detail about that. And here's what happened. Just like that. The nightmares went away. And I discovered what I later discovered when a few decades later, I became involved in the anxiety-provoking, the anger-provoking issue of climate disruption. I found that the antidote to despair, once again, was activism.
Right,
and that's
right.
what I do now.
And you know, let's jump into some of the projects that you personally are involved in. One is the Climate Reality Project, and the other is the Solutions Project. Could you tell our listeners who may not be familiar with those projects what they're about and how you are personally involved and how they might become involved?
Absolutely. So, in fact, I can even give you organizations that are in Northern California or in New York, since we have folks listening. So the Climate Reality Project is an international organization that really Al Gore and others put together back in 2008 or 9. And we train people worldwide and have trained hundreds of thousands of people to educate about the issue of climate disruption, which is an existential issue, which is something that we have to act on really, really quickly. And I can go into detail about why that's the case. So we educate. We also do federal level lobbying, and now that's virtual, but it's still quite effective. The other organization that is that works with the knowledge that the Solutions Project has given us about how to get off fossil fuels in time to save a livable climate, that organization is actually 350 Bay Area, which is an affiliate of 350.org. Another international organization. So the Solutions Project uses, the Solutions Project is, tells us that we can get off fossil fuels and get to renewables easily by 2050. And by 2030 or 40, we can get to 80% renewables. In other words, to save the planet, to save it, a planet that is not just a planet, but one graced by life. And I can give you more details on how that would work.
Well, I think John has a question. John?
Sure. First of all, good morning, Janet. I'm so happy you're on the show. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm looking at a picture of you dated December 6, 2019, and you're sitting in front of the BlackRock offices in San Francisco, holding up a sign, "Climate change is a health emergency." Now, for our listeners, BlackRock is the world's largest asset manager. As of January, they had $8.7 trillion in assets under management. They operate globally with 70 offices in 30 countries and clients in 100 countries. And along with Vanguard and State Street, they're considered to be the big three index funds that dominate corporate America. You're sitting in your hospital gown, the white jacket that
white coat
doctors wear.
The white coat.
The white coat. What is the connection between money and climate change? What is the connection?
On so many levels. So we know that the fossil fuel industry, let's go to the big one. I mean, we've really known about the dangers of climate change. And by the way, the medical aspects, well, there's never been a public health issue as great as climate change, because we're talking about potentially, if we don't do something within the next few decades, we're talking about human extinction, which is a really bad day for public health. But the money, back in the 1800s, we had descriptions of the probability of climate change, but certainly in the last 50 years, it was known. It was known among scientists. And in the last 40 years, it was known, for instance, by companies like ExxonMobil, who knew, and they had scientists who went out and they actually were calculating like how much the world would heat over a period of time and how that would affect their ability to, say, extract oil from the Arctic. Now, they knew that, but they had and they were good scientists, the thing they didn't do is they didn't tell us. Instead, they and other fossil fuel purveyors promoted disinformation. They set the seeds of doubt, just like it happened with the cigarette industry. In fact, they used the same public relations firms to manage to keep us in the dark, and they're still doing it. So that's one of the ways that big money works, and works to prevent us from doing what we have to do, acting. But they may have the dollars, but we have the numbers, and there's some signs that even in BlackRock that they're understanding that the future is not fossil fuels, but we have to push everybody harder. In California, California legislature, there's tons of money, 10 million this year, there are more millions other years, going to continue to increase the extraction and refining of fossil fuels. So that's where big money comes in.
Yeah, and IPOs and SPACs are at an all-time high right now. But I want to direct our listeners' attention to another pot of money where money may be the solution and not the problem. And that's Elon Musk's gift of $100 million for the gigaton scale carbon removal project. I'm sorry. Do you want to talk? I mean, that's extraordinary that he has set up this prize that he calls the X Prize for carbon removal, aimed at tackling the biggest threat facing humanity, fighting climate change and rebalancing the Earth's carbon cycle. And he's offering prizes up to $100 million to remove gigatons of carbon from the Earth by the year 2030. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, and what you know about that prize? And again, any group can apply for this award. Any individual genius can apply for this award. Tell us a little bit about it.
Okay, the specifics of that, you may know in greater detail. I would never disparage, and I know a little bit about it, I would never disparage the idea of trying to get, and we're going to need, I believe, we're going to need to scale up big means to draw down carbon dioxide. In fact, it's in the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's in their best models. However, we need not to be too far deflected about, and I applaud this. I applaud trying to do that. Any ways of drawing down carbon, that's great. Regenerative agriculture is one major way of doing that. But we have to always keep our eye on the major part of the prize. And that major thing is we have to stop emitting. And I know that Musk I know that he's well-intentioned, but there are people whose intentions are, let's draw it down so we can keep polluting, and that just can't happen. It's like when somebody's in the emergency room with a knife in their back, you transfuse them, but you also take the knife out. So we have to stop emitting, and we have to do it very quickly. But I applaud such projects.
707-923-3911. Dr. Kirsch, we have a listener who'd like to ask you a question. Go ahead, caller, with your question.
Thank you so much. I, first of all, want to thank you for the important work of Physicians for Social Responsibility. It's a very important group, and also for mentioning 350.org and the dedicated efforts of Bill McKibben. So thank you for those. I wanted to follow up on the question about money, because money is what, unfortunately, talks and makes Exxon respond. There's this article in today's New York Times about how long it's going to take them to respond to the important work that you're doing. I'd like to ask you, what is the right set of incentives that you, besides educating and building the advocacy, what are the incentives that are actually going to get these large corporations to implement and sustain these initiatives, the prevent emission, and to get governments to enact policies? We've got a 4-year possibility now, but the next administration may counter it. So what are the incentives for building in sustainability that can't change?
Thank you, caller.
Thank you. No, that's an excellent group of questions, actually. And, I mean, the incentives are that, well, they're not going to do it alone. So, BlackRock, Chevron, they're going to say and they're going to pledge to try to do better. And there are incentives built right in because, for instance, coal, that is going down. I mean, it's basically a dying industry. And after a while, fossil fuel projects, one of the incentives is they're not going to find underwriters because the stuff is too dangerous. So I think Bill McKibben, whom you mentioned, said something like, it's their industry is dying, and these big industries, it's hard to make bets. Currently, they're doing very well, but people don't make bets on the present. So their future is looking dim, but it's not looking dim enough that we need to exert all kinds of pressure, and that means lobbying. That means, and that's why I want, as Harvey Milk famously said, I'm here to recruit you, to join in with these organizations, to work on divestment programs, to work on putting pressure, the kind of pressure that got us to divest, getting out of apartheid in South Africa. The same kind of things. UC Berkeley divested of $83 billion, or UC system recently. So that kind of pressure by the public needs to be brought to bear. We also need more regulation, and this is like an anathema to certain segments of the population, but we need to regulate the hell out of fossil fuel industries to make sure that they can't continue polluting, and that is going to require pressure on the Biden administration, pressure that comes up, for instance, out in the Solutions Project, and pressure on all legislatures, both here and federal, to get to 100% renewables. We have to get there by 2050. We should get there sooner.
It's 17 minutes past the hour.
Yes,
if you just joined us, we're speaking. You can hear Janice Kirsch. She is our guest today, speaking about all things on climate and how we can stop it. I had a question about the Green New Deal. You mentioned the 4 years of opportunity that we have with President Biden. Could you speak about his position and his platform regarding the Green New Deal as it relates to climate?
Well, so he never embraced the Green New Deal, which is really, it was introduced last year, in 2019 actually, and it's basically an aspirational thing that covers, it's a jobs, it's like, FDR's New Deal. It would require lots of agencies to do lots of great things like provide health care for everyone and lots of green jobs and, of course, getting to 100% renewables rapidly. Biden's plan is not the Green New Deal. He calls it a clean energy revolution, and it is far less ambitious, and you could argue, well, that's because that's politics, but his is basically that by 2035, we get all electricity in homes, and it would come from wind, solar, and to some extent nuclear. But that's just homes, and that's not enough. We also need businesses, and we also need other sectors, transportation, everything, to get to 100% renewable energy. He does have initiatives for building many more charging stations for electric vehicles, and he's actually cutting and pasting a great Obama-era order to increase, and he has the power to do this, to increase the energy efficiency of cars so that it becomes really not remunerative to automobile producers to make internal combustion engines anymore, and they'll shift more to electric vehicles. So there's a lot he's doing that is good, and a lot, but it doesn't go to the level of the Solutions Project, which isn't as all-encompassing as the Green New Deal, but is something that could get us to 100% renewables by before 2050, 80% by probably by 2030, and 100% by 2050, and we have the technology right now to do it. We have enough solar. We have enough wind. I mean, we have the technology to have enough. And we can do this all There's the Solutions Project is in part one of the greatest innovators in it is Mark Jacobson, a professor of environmental and civil engineering at Stanford, and his team. And they've long modeled a way to get there, to get by 2030 or even or as late as 2050. The world can do it. It's possible, even without any major breakthroughs. We have the technology right now. We just have to get the political will and force our leaders to do it.
Dr. Kirsch, if you will, let's talk about our report card here in California. And I want to tell our listeners as well that not only are you a physician in the Bay Area, you were an oncologist right here on the coast at the Mendocino Coastal Hospital. So you bring a lot of heart to the local scene as well as to the state and national scene. Let's talk about our report card. Here in California, we had a law that was passed in 2008, AB 32, which called upon California to reduce gashouse emissions to 1990 levels by 2020. Those initiatives included cap and trade program on carbon dioxide emissions. It was developed in conjunction with the Western Climate Initiative with other states and a regional consortium. It required buildings and appliances to use less energy. It required oil companies to make cleaner fuels and for utilities to provide a third of their energy from renewable sources like wind, solar, and geothermal power, and on and on. Did we meet that goal? How are we doing? What grade would you put on our report card?
I would give California, especially with that particular legislation, we did meet it. And then it was, as you know, enlarged upon with Senate Bill 32 that said, okay, now you got to go to 40% below 1990 emissions by 2030. And so I would give California a solid B. We're not A plus because the lobbying industry, lobbying for the oil industries have been so successful here. But we did meet that goal. SB 32 enlarged upon it. SB 100 that happened 2018 is a wonderful bill because it's taking it's making electricity providers go to 100% renewable, carbon-free by 2045. Now, I'd like it to be sooner, but still, I mean, that's groundbreaking. That's an A-plus bill. But recently we've had some sort of dismal failures. If you don't mind, can I tell you the last legislative season?
Sure, absolutely.
We had AB 345, which was a very modest ask, especially from somebody who cares about health, is that we just wanted the hydraulic fracturing, hydraulic chemical, high-pressure steam. We wanted that to be 2,500 feet away from communities, and there's environmental justice here. These are largely communities of color and lower income. We just wanted them to back up. And because even though the California legislature is a supermajority of Democrats, a lot of them are what are called oily Democrats. And they will vote for oil, who supports them in their campaigns, who puts for lobbying for the bills, $10 million last year, more years before. But basically, that bill did not pass, even after the 2 years of the legislative session. However, we're coming back again, and there have been huge coalitions that formed around passing that bill of climate groups and other environmental groups and environmental justice groups who are working to get a new bill, which is Senate Bill 467 across, which will have those setbacks, from schools and hospitals and communities, but will also end fracking. And I believe that that would be by 2027, there would be fracking would be outlawed, hydraulic fracturing, which we do mainly for oil in California, and is very toxic and to the climate, to the global issues, and then low to the ground issues of air pollution, water pollution, and human health. dangers. So that's what's coming up, and we've got to get that bill passed. And anybody, as I said, I'm here to recruit you. There are local groups, and there are the international groups, and a lot of the organizing we're doing online, and it works. And so that's what's happening now. There's and another interesting thing is that the Center for Biologic Diversity is suing the major regulator of oil drilling in California. It's called CalGEM, because they've been just doubling up on how many wells they're permitting, but they haven't done it with real environmental impact assessments or with community notification. So there's a lawsuit against one of our regulatory commissions, and I think that's just wonderful.
Dr. Kirsch, we have one more minute with you. You're here to recruit us. I'm signing on, and as many of our listeners are as well. Give us one concrete way we can volunteer with an organization. Give us one concrete way we can make a difference, however small.
With sincere pleasure. Get involved with a group. Don't try to do this alone. There's a social exhilaration and a sense of being able to use whatever skills you have. So if you're in Humboldt, for instance, there's 350humboldt.org. Go to that website. The Sierra Club, there's a Redwood chapter. Go there. There's 350.org and the Climate Reality Project that you can join from anywhere, and beginning April 22nd, take part in our next international, mainly be a national training. Join with PSR San Francisco that Bob will talk with you about next. But please join us, because we're now all doctors of destiny, and we can save ourselves. We can heal ourselves.
Thank you, Dr. Kirsch. It's been wonderful having you with us today, and we want to have you back to give us update and to recruit us. We thank you so much for being our guest today, and we want to have you back.
God bless you. God bless you.
Thank you so much. And likewise to you. Thank you.
We've been speaking with Dr. Janice Kirsch. She is from the medical school at University of California, San Francisco. She is trained in internal medicine as well as occupational environmental medicine at the same school. She's got advanced training in oncology and hematology at the Memorial Sloan Kettering Center. And she has a master's degree in public health degree. She serves as the Speakers Bureau Coordinator for 350 Bay Area. You heard her mention 350 Humboldt. She's on the Board of Directors of San Francisco Physicians for Social Responsibility and has been for the last 5 years a presenter for the Climate Reality Project. Tune in, find those things online, and we're going to take a brief pause before we get our next guest online. Remember, you can call in with your questions at 707-923-3911.